Well, we've July and we've started back up. We don't color on the dog. The conversation this week, one of the conversations at the county commission is when to do a referendum for appointed versus elected superintendent. Florida law allows you, after about a 5-year process, for a school board to ask for a referendum for the county to reconsider it. They've done that. The board has got to decide between will they do it in the general election of 2026 or will they do it in the primary of August, or they could do it, I guess, it'd be the August primary, or let the school board pick whenever they want to do it. So that's on the agenda. I don't think the commission has much choice but to do it. But what I wanted to do, and I brought in Walker Wilson, who's DIB Executive Director, but you also, as part of PYP, were one of the strong advocates for going to appointed superintendent. Walker, revisit why you believed and PYP believed, and more than 50% of the community believed, that an appointed superintendent was the right thing to do.
Yeah, thanks, Rick, for having me on to talk about this topic. It's certainly one that continues, it seems like, not just my time that I've been back home for now 10 years almost, but one that keeps coming up over and over again throughout the history of Escambia County. I think if this goes back on the ballot, this might be the 7th or 8th time Escambia County has voted on this issue. But this was a promise that Superintendent Malcolm Thomas made, that when he was done, that he would ask this question to the voters and say, do you want to move forward with an elected superintendent or an appointed superintendent? And at the time, I guess it was 2018 or 2020, somewhere in there.
It was 2018. Yeah.
PYP was approached and asked, where we landed on the issue. So at that time, we kind of got arguments from both sides of why one was better than the other. And the organization landed on the fact that we thought having an appointed superintendent was the better move for our county and for the students in the schools and the teachers. And the reason we thought that was, one, you get to kind of open up the pool of candidates that the community and the school board would get to choose from. You certainly can have someone that's homegrown, like we see now with Superintendent Leonard, or you could have somebody that comes from outside the area, like we had with Superintendent Dr. Tim Smith. And so I think, it also gives you that opportunity to, if things aren't going the way the school board or the electorate wants to see, you're able to change course a lot quicker than you would be if it was an elected superintendent and on a 4-year term. You also kind of put some more, I think, some juice behind school board members and their role as being able to essentially hire whoever's going to be the superintendent or fire someone that's not living up to the expectations of the community. And all of our school board members are elected, single member districts, just like county commissioners are in those same areas. So we certainly have different opinions from different corners of the county to weigh in on this. And we thought, this really gives us the best chance to have the best person in this job, whether they're from Escambia County, Santa Rosa County, Baldwin County, or Michigan. It didn't really matter. We were going to have the best person in that job that was most qualified and gone through a public, interviewing process and vetting process as well.
Well, I've lived in this area, almost 50 years now. And in looking at, the elected superintendent, Escambia County went through a period where just about every election there was a new superintendent. I think Jim Paul was one of the few that actually got elected to 2 terms in a row. Malcolm got elected to 3. And I think one of the things that changed with Malcolm was he was the first superintendent that actually threatened people if they ran against him. He didn't do it publicly, but no one rose up in the ranks to run against him, which happened over and over again. No one felt that they were going to lose their job if they ran against him or get punished. Bill Slayton ran against Jim Paul. He was the principal of Woodham High School at the time. He didn't get punished. He came back and became a school board member. So there was a whole different dynamic that happened in the Malcolm Thomas years that was different than what we'd seen in politics. He really solidified power. And I think that was also, for us as a newspaper, that was an issue that if someone got into that job, if they so willed to do it, they could hold on to that job for quite a long time without having anybody challenge them. And that happened with Malcolm. I think the other thing that I thought was interesting is, I know you're like I am. You're a political wonk. You like to look at numbers. When you look at the vote, Walker, how did that vote play out as across city and county in the different districts?
Right. So you really saw that this was a north or kind of west northwest side of the county was certainly in favor of having an elected superintendent. And if you lived kind of south of I-10 or on the west side of the city of Pensacola, you voted to have an appointed superintendent. And so you saw folks that lived in the city of Pensacola overwhelmingly vote for elected. You saw a lot of folks on the
I mean,
west
for
side of
appointed.
the
You mean for
city. I mean,
appointed?
appointed. Yeah, sorry.
Right.
Saw folks in District 3, County District 3 vote overwhelmingly for an appointed superintendent. And then folks at what was the time, District 1, kind of up towards Beulah, and District 5, vote for elected. And so I think, again, you see that, clear as day in the vote on the school board, right? They're listening to their constituents and what they're telling them and what they would like to see. And it's the same thing. And you had a 3-2 vote that was close. I think Mr. Slayton essentially was maybe that swing vote with the previous school board. And now Mr. Harrell comes in and is kind of keeping on his promise that he made when he ran for election, and that was to bring this issue back. And he knew that Mr. Adams and Mr. Fetzko would most likely support him because they had supported at least asking the people what option they wanted. And I think, at the end of the day, we asked this, I guess, what is it, 8 years ago now? It did win. It was a hard fought effort. It was a close election on that referendum, but the people spoke and they made a choice. And I think this, continually bringing this issue forward, I don't know, gives a lot of morale to the employees at the school district, the teachers at the school district, or gives a lot of confidence for parents at the school district to think, things are in limbo. They're not certain on how things maybe are being done or run. But I think it just maybe leaves questions in parents' minds. And we're seeing now public schools are in competition big time with private schools that are taking vouchers and taking, the money with the student. If the parent chooses to put their student in a private school, that money's coming out of the public education system and going over to whatever school the parent would like their child to go to. And so, again, it's leaving more uncertainty in parents that are been choosing public schools to send their kids to. Do we know what we're doing here in the public education system? Is this a question on performance? And so I think it just, again, leaves a lot of question marks for people and maybe not a lot of confidence in this kind of battle we have going on right now with public and private schools. I'm a product of public schools, and so I certainly believe, I had a great experience in Escambia County Public Schools and got me partly in where I am today, right? So I think it certainly serves a purpose in this community and has for a lot of people and a lot of leaders and business leaders in this community as well.
Well, and we've had two appointed, and it worked the way that it should. The school board majority felt that Dr. Smith wasn't doing what they wanted, so they changed it. Over the period of time, the performance of the appointed superintendent has been pretty good. If you look at grades and scores and kindergarten readiness, and the overall school system seems to have improved under an appointed superintendent.
Yeah, I think so. And again, you had the grades just came out for schools this year. And again, Escambia County slowly moving forward in those scores. And it's never going to be this monumental swing unless you have something like a pandemic like COVID that completely changes the way we function. But again, you want to see these slow, steady growth going towards kind of the right direction, which we're doing right now under leadership of Superintendent Leonard, who's appointed by this school board. And I think, if he continues that up and has confidence with the community and engages himself with the community, then I think, he certainly deserves to stay there as long as we continue to see this type of progress. And if we hadn't elected, Superintendent Leonard, then we would have to wait, I guess, another 4 years, and the public would get to make that decision. And again, I always struggle with school board being a partisan. The superintendent would be a partisan elected position. And so you're really leaning on two parties electing their candidate in a primary that's typically going to be, your more liberal Democrats or your more conservative Republicans. So you've got two candidates that are kind of on maybe the opposing end of the spectrum. And most people, I think, in the community would rather have somebody that's more in the middle, one way or the other, leading our school district and trying to bring folks together when it comes to educating children here in Escambia County.
Well, I think the challenge will be, it's going to be on the ballot, which side has the most momentum. It's a little different, for me, Walker, in looking at it, is that on the county commission, we really see the commissioners listen to each other and really work towards, they listen to what each one wants to do in their district. But in the end, they're always trying to build a coalition for what's better for the county. And in the school board, this is what's shaping up in the school board, which is concerning to me, is those that aren't a part of the city are abandoning the city schools. I mean, those three, and I'm talking more harsh than you would ever, but you're looking at, the non-municipal school board members uniting, and only two of them really have good school systems. Fesco doesn't have good schools in his district. It was one of the reasons he was, challenged as hard as he was. And, he's siding, but he's a long time school, part of the school system. But you're going to see, I think, city residents get more disenchanted with public schools if this continues, where they put all the resources outside of the city and the city schools suffer.
Yeah, I could see that. And I think, if it, at the end of the day, if it went back to being an elected superintendent or you saw some big change, I think this could put more ammunition in behind the mayor to kind of really advocate for this option for cities to be able to create their own charter school district that we don't see here in Florida. And I think that really gives him the opportunity to kind of, bring something into the city that city residents could opt into, and something where they would hire a superintendent to run those schools. And again, that would take a lot of movement in Tallahassee to get that. But again, we saw a bill brought forward that would have created something like that, and it didn't make it through and pass, but that conversation has now happened for 2 sessions in a row. And so do we continue to see that with everything that's going on in the public education system and with cities, especially bigger cities, really competing to try and have a good education system in their city, maybe that's outside of where the county residents may lie, because they're wanting to be competitive with other cities and have a good education system to attract businesses and corporations to put their headquarters there, to have a portion of their staff be homed inside of their city limits so they can have more better paying jobs and create better housing and all the issues that we hear. And education is a big part of where those companies are going to look, that they've got a good school system to send their employees' kids to.
Well, it's definitely coming on the ballot. We'll see what form it does. I guess there's still a possibility it might not, but I don't see the commissioners not putting on the ballot if you had the majority of the school board asking for it. So I think that's just not good policy. But are you ready to gear up for another fight?
Yeah, I guess so. Let's buckle up and get after it. So it'll be interesting to see, and then how, I guess, the county commission decides to let this land, or allow the school board to make the decision, or a supervisor of elections make the decision on when this is placed on the ballot. That's kind of a funny nuance to this, to me, is that, it's kind of when is it going to be, not if it's going to be, right? So that's certainly an interesting deal. And I think the last time we did this, it was a general election, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. It was in the general, and it was an off year, just like this would be.
Okay.
2026. So it'd be very similar. I think a primary vote, you're not going to have as big a turnout. I don't think that's a fair way to do it. And you definitely don't want the school board picking some odd week to do it and not have all the people participating. So I think those are the challenges. I think if the city comes out heavily for it again, and the rest of those other districts in the county are able to outweigh the city vote, I think you're going to have more citizens in the city look at breaking away from the school district in some form. So it's possible.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I always think of this, and of course there are some proponents of doing what I'm about to lay out, but it's, are the folks that are very adamant about electing a superintendent, do they want to elect the county administrator? And if not, then what's the difference? So,
slippery slope.
I know there certainly are proponents of that those conversations have kind of happened, but that I've heard about from my time being back here and kind of following everything that goes on in the county, but it certainly hasn't come to a head, at least this level of conversation. Again, I think appointed superintendent gives the opportunity to keep somebody that's been really good and reward them for their success. And if something's kind of going awry or not going the way you want to see it happen, you can certainly change course much more quickly than you can electing somebody every 4 years.
Correct. Well, Walker, thank you for being on today. For our viewers, please like and share. We need you to do that for us and subscribe to the channel. So, Walker, thanks.
Thanks, Rick.
All right, take care.
About that.